Hello, Merry Christmas, Happy Boxing Day, whatever, all those fun holidays. Welcome into Boilermaker Lounge. I am Sam Sprunger, joined by the All American Grant Floor. Grant, how are we today?
Doing pretty good, yeah. Had a pretty good Christmas and ready now as we keep moving through. And it's just kind of crazy. It's like there's so much anticipation for Christmas, and then it gets here and it's great. And then just like that, we're
Just like
beyond.
that, it takes forever to get here in so many people's eyes, mostly children, but it takes forever to get here, and then it's gone in minutes. Basically, it seems like it's just a snap of the fingers, and it's no longer the Christmas day itself. But the holidays are still there, and the Boilermakers had it off, as did everybody else in the college ranks, at least on the basketball side. But now it's back to the grindstone. We get back to it on Monday. The Boilermakers host the Kent State Golden Flashes. It's a mouthful. In Mackey Arena. Grant, Kent State's pretty good.
Yeah, I feel like kind of continuing the theme of mid majors that Purdue plays. This is not Cupcake City. Like this is a good mid major team that could get to the tournament this year. They're in the same conference as Akron, and Akron was obviously a good mid major as well. So both of these teams are solid. But Kent State, um, they're what 10-2 overall. They
Yep.
haven't played any high major competition yet,
Nope.
so it'll be interesting to see how they, can contend with Purdue after not facing anyone their caliber yet this season. But they've got a roster that has a lot of guys that have played decent minutes, and they can shoot the basketball well. They can. I've seen a little bit of film. They move it really well. They got some athleticism. They lack a couple of big pieces that will hurt them against Purdue, but overall, not a kind of team you can just come in and slouch against and expect to roll over.
Well, their go to guy is Delreco Gillespie. He's a 6'8", 230 pound senior, averaging 19 points and 12.6 rebounds per game. You got to think that he's going to match up against TKR, and they're going to bang it around in the paint, and we might have a little battle down there to see which big man's gonna who leads the team in either team in scoring and in rebounds, because TKR does that as well. A battle to see which big man is going to be the better one.
Yeah, those two guys should be a really good matchup. I think, if they are playing at the four, whoever's at the five might get torched by Oscar Clough. I think that's a huge
Right.
advantage for Purdue. But yeah, with the assumption that those two match up, they should be pretty good. Gillespie's averaging like 12.6 rebounds a game, which is more than TKR by about 2.5 rebounds. Um,
In
also
fairness,
scores
though,
a lot of points.
TKR has only played 2 games or missed 2 games, and they play a better schedule.
Right. Yeah. Not to say that Gillespie's a better rebounder, but
Right.
it's going to be a good test for TKR still. And then Gillespie can score too. He's had a 30-point game this year. I think
Mm-hmm.
did he score 34 as his season high?
I
He's definitely
believe
got
so.
30.
Let me check
Um,
here.
yeah, and he's 6'8", so he matches up decently size wise to TKR. The problem I think for Kent State is they don't have anyone bigger than 6'9" in their lineup, and they don't start a guy at 6'9", so they're going to struggle with guys like Jacobson and Clough, and ultimately they just don't have the forces as far as their front line to compete with Purdue. But that's not to say that they couldn't scrap something out, and they've got 4 or 5 guys that can come in and play that are 6'8" or 6'9", so they can rotate guys through, and if they get in foul trouble, they can scrap and bring in some fresh bodies that might be able to just work hard and compete. So while Kent State is small, and I think that bodes well for Purdue, they're not like just they're going to have some ways to still compete despite some of that lack of size.
Gillespie scored 30 against Cleveland State back in November, mid-November.
Gotcha.
That's his season high, but I mean, he puts the ball in the hole. His lowest output is 12. He's done that twice, once against Cleveland State, a second game against Cleveland State, and wow, that's weird that they play him twice, but they're not in the same same conference, but one was a tip-off classic, and the other one was maybe just a regularly scheduled game, I guess. And then UNC Wilmington, he scored 12, so he's been held to well under his average. But at the same time, he is capable of putting 30 on the board, but
Yeah.
I agree with you, the fact that, the Kent State's biggest guy is going to be 6'9". That's going to bode well for our five. Like you said, Oscar Clough, Daniel Jacobson, could potentially tear it up and really just put some working on the center. And that's what I anticipate is I think TKR is going to be. I think they'll match up. Gillespie and he will match up. And I honestly, I see TKR as the better player. That's not discounting what Gillespie's done to this point, but you said it yourself. They haven't really played anybody, and if you look at their overall output this year during the season, it's not. I mean, or their opponents against this season. They've played Cornell. The UNC Wilmington's kind of like their best. I mean, they lost to Troy, excuse me, and they lost to Portland. So I mean, their losses aren't even really that great losses. Now, don't get me wrong, Purdue lost by 23 to Iowa State, but Iowa State's also now number 3 in the country compared to Portland State and Troy. But they do put the ball in the hole. They average what is it, 94.3 points a game. Grant, that's some high pace right there.
Yeah, they have a really good offense. Like I said, I think they shoot it well. I think they move it well.
Yeah.
They've got good basketball players on their team. I mean, we talked about Gillespie. Their second leading scorer is Safford. I think he's the one that dropped 34 in one of their first games.
You might
of the
be
season.
right there, yeah.
So they've got two different guys that have put up 30 points at different points this season. They've got Sion Medley, who's a really good passer. He averages 6.5 assists. So I assume he would be matched up with Braden. Safford's going to be one of those guys that probably CJ Cox draws the assignment. They've got, like I said, I think they've got like 4 different forwards that can come into this game. Desmond Briscoe, Magnus, and Tenman are both start off on the bench, but can come in and provide some good minutes. Like, you look at the data, and they haven't played a strong schedule at all. They have a couple of losses to mid-majors, Troy and Portland, and it's like, well, yeah, they're 10-2, but probably aren't going to come in and do much against Purdue. And there's a good chance they don't really keep the score close. But at the same time, I think they do have a pretty high ceiling. And if you don't come into this game with the right mindset and the right intensity, I think Kent State certainly can cause some problems. And so, it's one of those where it's a little hard to know what Kent State's going to bring because you just haven't seen them against high major competition. You can't look at a game against, Illinois and be like, oh, Illinois beat them by 30, so we can expect Purdue to do the same. But at the same time, I feel like you can expect their players to keep playing the way that they have, and you just expect it just comes down to what Purdue does to kind of counter that.
And looking at this, how we talked about Auburn last week, that, if they don't hit a certain plateau, it doesn't seem like they win. Like they had to score at least 82 points or whatever to be able to their 82 was their mark to where every time they've hit that, they won, and anytime they were underneath that, they'd lost. These guys, Kent State, they've won a game 76-72. They've won a game 110-102. Like they seem to adjust and be able to play whatever style they need to, and they've won ball games. And now you also look at the fact that they've lost a game 88-78 and lost a game 103-97. So like they adjust and are able to play with teams as to the pace. So it seems like they're at least able to adjust to the pace. Do I anticipate that they're going to be able to hang with Purdue? I don't. But at the same time, I didn't think Oakland would. Granted, that was without TKR, but I didn't think Oakland would hang that well with them. But it's a different time, different. A lot's happened since that Oakland game, and I think Purdue's grown to the point where they're actually pretty strong. And you know what? They're playing with a big chip on their shoulder too. I think that's another thing is Purdue's coming in after the 3 games since, and we'll talk about why the 3 games is important. We're going to talk about a different topic a little bit later. But other than those 3, they're still coming in ticked, like that, mad that that Iowa State happened, mad that other people are talking about what they did to them last year. Like it keeps piling on. It's like, I don't know that you want to keep making this team upset. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It seems to me that if you say something, and I'm not saying, you're not rightfully able to say, well, because Auburn did smack Purdue around last year, but you know what? You don't probably mention that a couple of days before the game
Yeah.
that you're playing them, but whatever. But it just seems like that this team just keeps, anytime that they use fuel or use people talking badly about them or doubting them as fuel to say, you know what, watch us, let's do this.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're in a pretty good spot right now, just in the sense of like, Michigan is still kind of seen as probably the top team in the Big Ten at this point in the season, and they should be undefeated with the wins that they have. Um, and Purdue's still not quite in the echelon that they think they should be. Probably they being ranked 5th and 7th in the net and stuff. Like they think they should be contending for the #1 spot. I think they have that kind of a roster, but as long as they're not there and they're kind of still working to get there, I think this team plays with that chip on their shoulder and kind of plays the hunter. And so, not to say that if they end up climbing back to the #1 spot, that's going to be the end of the world or anything, but like I think there's something to be said for, we're still trying to get back to where we know we should be and we know we're capable of being, and it gives you a little bit of an extra edge. And so, yeah, to your point, I think like you said, they're going to be playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They're going to have that extra level of intensity, and that doesn't bode well for a team like Kent State that, well, yeah, they're a good mid-major and they have some decent players. They ultimately don't have the firepower to hang with Purdue. And so, yeah, I don't expect this to cause Purdue much trouble, but at the same time, it'll be interesting to see just how some of these matchups unfold.
And just looking at their and I gotta, I'm not at all saying that Kent State's not any good. They don't even really have a high quality opponent yet.
Right.
Like Purdue's the first one that they're walking into a gym that's going, okay, this is a quad 1. Like the rest of these, I just don't see a quad 1 anywhere close. Like none of these. Like there was one that doesn't even have, what is it? What team is that? Something Wesleyan. Roberts
Yeah, I'm not.
Wesleyan.
I'm not sure all their teams they played are Division 1.
Right. And that's my kind of what I'm getting at on that is,
Yeah.
it's and mid majors are going to play some lessers, but at the same time, some will play a pretty good schedule, and unfortunately Kent State hasn't done that yet.
Yeah.
Although
They haven't.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say they have not played any quad 1 or quad 2 games. They're 5-2 in quad 3 and 3-0 in quad 4. And
There you
then
go.
they have 2 games that probably aren't Division 1.
Well, I know the Roberts Wesleyan is one, and I don't know who the other one would be. Oh wait, Penn State. This
Yeah.
is the second time or
We
second
we
team
saw
that's
them.
played this Penn State.
Yeah.
Shenango.
I
Yeah,
forget who it was that played them the first time, but I remember that on somebody's
might have been
schedule, but
Akron. To tell you the truth,
it might have been. Which,
but anyways,
yeah, just tying in again to Kent State. I think Kent State's a team that we might be talking about in March
mm-hmm.
as a mid-major playing in this tournament. I think either them or Akron are probably the 2 top dogs in that MAC. Not to say that, a couple other teams like who else is in there?
Miami of Ohio is undefeated right
Miami,
now.
Ohio. Yeah, they're obviously
Buffalo.
looking good. Yeah, Buffalo, even Northern Illinois, like those teams all could probably win that league and go after their automatic bid. But I think Kent State and Akron both have the rosters. And obviously, Akron's played some good opponents early, and they only have 2 losses. So I think we're looking at between Akron and Kent State, both potentially teams, one or the other, that could get into the tournament late in March. And that this is where it helps Purdue a lot because
Sure.
they're like their bar for mid majors when they're playing in this first part of the season. Their bar is high compared to other mid majors. Whereas in the past, Purdue and still currently other teams are playing the mid majors that are middle of the pack to bottom of their conferences. And so then you get to March and you're playing a conference champion and you're expecting the same thing as what you played earlier in the season. And that's just they're completely different calibers of teams. So I think it's really good that Purdue schedules these guys. And again, like I said, we saw it 2 years ago when Purdue opened the season against Samford and they went on to play the tournament, played Kansas in the first round and almost beat them, if I remember right.
Actually, if I remember correctly, they had them beat, but then a couple of plays right at the end kind of could have been called in Samford's side, but didn't, and they got beat by like 2 points, I think.
So there was that, and there might have even been one other team that year that Purdue played early in the season, but then played in the tournament as conference champions and played respectfully well. So
sure, yeah.
I think you just see the fruits of that from Purdue when they play this type of schedule. So this is a big game either way, just for those kind of late season implications.
Yeah, I mean, looking at Purdue's schedule, they're probably looking at one, maybe 3, if you count Rutgers as, which you do, 4 maybe that won't make the tournament, like out of their first 12 games. And that might sound like a lot. You're like, well, that's a third, but that's just it. A lot of times it's, oh, we've played a couple of tournament teams in that non-con. No, most of Purdue's non-conference schedule, either A, will, or B, will contend for its automatic bid in its conference for an automatic or for March. And then that is I call it the Tom Izzo effect. I'm sure I'm not the only one that calls it that, but like he just seemed like he was the first one quite a few years ago that just started. Yeah, we're 6-4 going into the last weekend, but look at those 4 losses and look at the 6 wins. We actually played some pretty good mid majors, and we hung with North Carolina, we hung with Kentucky, we hung with and those are our 4 losses, and you're like, okay, and then they come in and they play 2/3, and now this is where I differ because I think Purdue's going to be at the top of the Big Ten, but like, even if they didn't and they struggled a little bit in that Big Ten season and they finish 4th like they did last year, but Purdue does it this year again, yeah, we'd be like, man, what in the heck is going on? But then you sit there and consider what their losses are. Come March, there's been times that a 5th seeded Michigan State was the favorite in its region to get to the Final Four, and that's why. So if Purdue somehow ends up in 4th or 5th in the conference, and let's just say, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Purdue could. I'm not saying that I expect it. I'm not saying that I would be very happy about it. But at the same time, there's an outside chance, the way the chips fall, the way some games go, that Purdue might finish 4th or 5th in the conference. But I can guarantee you they're going to have a 4 or 5 seed, and they're going to be one of the toughest. They're going to be one that the people in March are going to be looking at the brackets and going, watch out for that Purdue team. They're a 5 seed, but look at what they've done. Not saying that'll happen. I expect them to be the 1 seed. We're going to be watching them run through whatever. 39-1 is a great record. So I don't anticipate it. But my point being is their early non-conference schedule is what makes them and molds them into a really threatening team because of the competition they play.
Yeah, well, even look at what happened last year. Like they kind
Yeah.
of struggled through the Big Ten. And then I think a lot of people would have thought, like, oh, 5 or 6 seed. They ended up getting the 4 seed, and it's because they had those wins against Alabama and Ole Miss earlier in the season and a
Right.
couple other decent wins that looked really good come March and kind of gave them that edge over some of those other mid-pack teams. And then they proved that they deserve the 4 seed with the way they played in the tournament. So, yeah, I think if something like that happens, or if not even those 3 wins, especially the Alabama, Texas Tech, and Auburn, I think are going to age really well. And Purdue's just going to have a nice little resume there to fall back on, a foundation. And we still expect them to pick up some wins in the Big Ten season, like Illinois, Michigan State, Michigan. I would imagine they pick up at least 1 or 2, if not all 3 of those, because they're all in Mackey. And
39-1, Grant. They're going to win them all.
yeah, I mean, so they've got a lot of good opportunities in short, and yeah, they're really in a pretty good situation if you look at all of these different elements that over the course of a 40-game season are pretty important.
Well, the ESPN predictor has a 97.3% chance that Purdue wins. I would agree with that assessment. Just going through the schedule, each of their schedules, and kind of having known, we've been to a few games already that we've seen the eye test passes on the TV and in person that Purdue is a really good basketball team, and whoever they're playing is going to have their hands full, even if they do end up winning by 23 and shooting the lights out in the second half and beating Purdue by 23. But goodness gracious, yeah, I anticipate this being a pretty comfortable win. Yeah, 15, 20 points, I think, and maybe kind of going away. Maybe that's not even indicative of how dominant Purdue was. So maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see this team letting a little bit of a break. It might be a little slow start at the first because of the long layoff, but this team usually against a lesser opponent usually bounces back pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good assessment. Like you said, it's hard to know when you come off of, an 8-day break and then
Right.
you're playing a Kent State team that could be overlooked, and you have Christmas in there, all that kind of stuff. Like, hopefully, it doesn't really bother them at the start of the game, but it could.
Yeah.
But yeah, Purdue's got the better personnel. They're not going to let Kent State hang around too long, I don't think. And like you said, even a 15 to 20 point win, while that might seem a little bit small, just because with mid majors, a lot of times you come away with 30 to 40 point wins. I think that'd be a solid day for Purdue, and it might be one of those games like where you're up 25 to 30 at one point, and you bring in some guys off the bench, and you kind of cool off, and it ends up being
Right.
15 to 20.
That's what I said that
Yeah.
they're going away with it because hey, let's get everybody at the end of their bench some more playing time and get some because darn well that come Big Ten season that doesn't happen near as much. You're not able to empty your bench out and play it at the end as much. You do get some opportunities occasionally, depending on how well you're doing and if you have that great shooting night that opens it up to where at the end you can, but not very often in the Big Ten season does that happen. So it's definitely something that I love seeing them get to play because it means that, most of the time, 99.8% of the time, I love seeing them play because that means Purdue's up by so much that they're like, okay, we can give them some time to play. But, they did play against Iowa State too. So, all right. Well, let's move on to some other stuff. We just have a couple of other things that to talk about before this Friday edition of Boilermaker Lounge. The KenPom is out. Our buddy Dustin Schutte was nice enough to put both that and the net rankings on here or in his article. Purdue moved up. They were down. They were at number 7 in the KenPom and number 9 in the net rankings. Grant, they've moved up to number 5 now in the the KenPom up to number 7 in the net rankings. I know that these are looked at as a little bit better of an indicator than the AP poll and all that fun stuff. Most of the time, they kind of correlate with one another. Not exactly, but normally they correlate with one another somewhat well. Like Duke, they stayed at number 3, even though they got beat by Texas Tech on Saturday, in the net rankings. But they did dip in the KenPom because they lost. Purdue was, I think they were number 3 in the net, or were they number 2 behind Michigan in the net earlier before they lost, before they dropped, and they were not number 1 in KenPom when they lost. So they dropped down from there, and it had to do with the fact that they got beat by double digits and at home by a team. But they take a lot of other things into consideration. Do you know more about what goes into each of those?
I don't know the specifics. I wish I did, and I would
Yeah.
love to look into it more. I think a lot of it, there's a lot more that has to do with like the scoring margin of
Yeah.
victory against who you're playing that will factor, as well as just, they might take into account strength of schedule even more than the AP poll does and things like that. Obviously, the AP poll is just voters voting.
Did they
Um,
win? Yes. Okay, we'll move on.
yeah. So like, and there are aspects of that that I like and aspects that I honestly don't like as much, because I also am in the camp of like a win's a win, and as long as you're winning, you're doing good. But
Right.
at the same time, you have a team like Michigan that's blowing out all these good teams by 40 points, and I feel like that should definitely carry some weight, and sometimes it doesn't carry as much weight as maybe it should when you're just looking at an AP poll. So these types of rankings will indicate that, and you kind of see the reflection with Michigan being number 1 in both of those KenPom and net rankings, while they sit at number 2 in the AP poll. So
I was going to say that's
um,
the crazy thing is they're number 1 in both of those, but number 2 in the AP.
yeah, so yeah, I don't know the specifics outside of just like a heavier weight on scoring margin and strength of schedule. But I think you can kind of get a feel for it just based off of those
Right.
ideas. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't hold it. We're talking about going into the Big Ten season, right? After Monday's game, and we're gonna talk and evaluate kind of Purdue at that point. But that's not even the midway point. Like we're not quite there yet. We're still a few games away from being right in the middle, because there are just so many. I mean, we still have 18 more games in the Big Ten to play. I mean, that's a lot of. I think it's 18. Is it 18 or they play 20? Correct.
yep, they played
Okay.
20 total. They already played
Yeah,
two.
you're
So
correct. I knew they played 2, but I was like, did they mark it back to 18? But they no, we played. So like we still have 18 games once we're done with Monday's game. So we're not even halfway through the season yet. And it's still really early. Like a lot of people are in the media world are wishing that the basketball season would be moved to start at the first of the year. No. But it's because football's taking, looking at everything. But like we've seen round 1 of the CFP, so therefore there is a ton of football still to be played, and basketball is not going to be paid attention much to. People like us, we pay attention to the basketball season, but we're still extremely early in this season to the fact that, you know what, these top 10 teams in both of these rankings could be markedly different. A team goes on a big losing streak, they drop out, and all of a sudden, are we looking at a national champion in these top 10s? Probably our national champion sitting in here. We just don't know that for sure. But so rankings never get me too fired up. I like seeing the rankings just because it's fun, but at the same time, these two here are ones that are a little bit more true to it than the AP. Was I happy that Purdue was number 1 to start out the season? Great. Yes. because that just means that the anticipation is they should be one of the better teams in the country. But other than that, it doesn't mean a darn thing. We've talked about it needs to be number one at the end of the season.
Yeah. I saw a graphic, like I think it was yesterday. I don't know if it was Fox College Basketball or who that posted it on Instagram, but it put like the last 10 or 15, maybe even 20 teams that were ranked AP number one on Christmas Day. And as I was looking through, I don't think I saw anyone that ended up winning the national championship and being AP number one on Christmas Day. Like last year, it was Tennessee, who ended up being a 2 seed that just went up against Houston in the Elite Eight and got blown out. So, like, it was, like, obviously a lot to be said for it. Like, teams do well usually when they're ranked that high this late in the season. Not that it's late, just that it's
No, I
we
get
do
what you're
have
saying.
a couple months of basketball under our belts now. But like, it's obviously the national champions tend to be sitting 2, 3, 4, 5 somewhere in there. So it doesn't matter. It's interesting to look at and can just help kind of point us in the right direction. But like you said, if the last 20 teams on Christmas Day that were ranked number one haven't won a national championship, it just says
Sorry,
a lot
Arizona.
about right. And at the same time, Arizona and Michigan have looked dominant to start the season. I don't think Tennessee looked anywhere close to that dominant last year when they were number one.
I would agree.
But still, like, even 4 weeks from now, Arizona and Michigan could be back at the bottom of the top 10. And you could be looking at, Purdue, UConn, being the top two teams. Like, a lot changes very quickly, especially when you hit conference play.
Well, Grant, 39-1, so therefore they will be at number one at some point.
That's right.
This year.
That's the schedule, isn't
it? So yeah, I'm sure there is a good chance that we're looking, and you look at the net top 10. You've got Purdue and, of course, Michigan, but you've got Purdue and Michigan State also in that top 10. So, 3 Big Ten teams represented there in the net rankings there. Just Purdue and Michigan in the KenPom. So, I honestly don't know which one is more important or has been the more telling or most predictive of the two. But together they do a pretty decent job on giving us an idea of. There's a reason why the committee uses both of them to evaluate who they put into the tournament. But of course, they screwed it up 2 years ago or a few years ago when they didn't put Indiana State into the tournament when they should have. But that's a personal. That's a human problem, not the rankings problem. So, because they're still, at least as far as I know, the only team that was in the top 30 of the net rankings, not to get into the tournament, and they wouldn't have been a finals team like they were in the NIT, but they also were in the NIT and not the NCAA. They might have pulled off a couple upsets, but let's get out of that. Let's redirect, but I've got so many problems with the NCAA. But they've been Purdue's been rolling pretty well since their loss to Iowa State a couple weeks back. Grant, they are 3-0. They beat Minnesota, they beat Marquette, and then they beat Auburn. They held all 3 of those opponents to 60 points or less, and they've just looked like a completely different team that took that whooping on the floor against Iowa State.
Yeah, they've taken the necessary steps, I feel like, through these first 2 weeks since that game to recover and to kind of establish themselves as a different team and grow. And that's all you can really ask for. Obviously we haven't seen them play, a Michigan or Michigan State. That will kind of be the next step, I think, is seeing them play this type of performance against those teams.
Right.
But obviously you have a schedule that you can't really control once the season starts, and they made the most of those 3 games and they looked the part. So I'm confident that when those games do come around, Purdue's going to be where they're supposed to be. But yeah, it looked really good. Obviously, I love the defensive numbers, like holding those teams lower than 60, because that's kind of the bigger question that we've had for Purdue. The offense isn't very surprising at all, especially when all three of those games were within state lines. Um, but
Right.
like obviously, holding those three teams to under 60 is a lot easier than holding a team like Michigan or Michigan State to under 60. And so we'll have to see how that ages. But well, yeah, you look at those three games, you look at the fact that they had to play those three games, and I feel like they did exactly what you could have asked for. Like, you can't ask for more than 3 20-point wins, holding teams less than 60. There's not much more you can do.
And you'd go just a little step further. Braden Smith's averaging 11 points in that time frame, but also 12 assists. The first time in school history that a player has double-digit assists in 3 straight games. I think he took that loss to not that every one of those Boilermakers didn't take that loss to Iowa State hard, but for something to click like this in Braden Smith, he looks like he's taken it even more personally and thought, you know what, we're not doing this again. We're not going to lose like this again, and I'm going to put it on my back and just make sure that it doesn't happen. Now, you're right. It happened against opponents that aren't the likes of a Michigan State, an Illinois, a Michigan, a Bloomington-backed IU. I think you get into Assembly Hall, that's going to be a crowd that or a game that's going to be not impossible but very difficult to win. Going into Bloomington like that. But at the same time, he's also doing things that we've never seen before as for Purdue, and that to me just says that he took that even more personally and just took it to heart and said, "Nope, not going to happen on my watch again. Not going to happen again."
Yeah, I mean, even like you look at the individual matchups of that game, like Killian Torre and Taman Lipsy, like those guys played really well. You could say they probably outplayed Braden. At
Yeah,
least Lipsy
yeah.
did, but the way that he passed and scored, and the way that those two were able to guard, like I think obviously the team aspect is what's more important, especially for him, for Braden. But I think even individually, that had to have been kind of a wake up call and just another chip on your shoulder moment. And so you've seen his response as well as anybody, like you said, and that bodes really well for Purdue. I think it continues to bode well when he matches up with other good teams and good guards. Like
Yeah.
Michigan has Elliot Cadeau, Michigan State has Jeremy Fears. Both of those guys are being talked about as equally, some of the best point guards in the country, along with Braden. And so I think when he matches up with those guys in Mackey, I think you'll see a different flip of the switch from him. And I think the root of that, you can even go back to that Iowa State game as being one of those moments that's going to help him when he plays those home games against Michigan and Michigan State. Because ultimately, when you look at those matchups, you look at like Michigan State at home, the comparison from a matchup and game standpoint will be to Iowa State. Top
Yep.
5 teams or top 10 that have good point guards, also some wings that can hurt you. Like, they have a lot of different good lineup personnel. Those are going to be the comparisons. And so you're going to look back at the Iowa State game, and those things are going to resurface when we reach those big games later on against those high level competition. So, to your point, all this to say, like, that Iowa State game, especially for Braden Smith, is going to continue fueling them even in several weeks down the road.
Well, and that always brings me back to the conversation I had with Braden on the court after they won the Midwest Regional against Tennessee 2 years ago. I asked him, I said, a lot of times people criticize you for not being able to make a decision. And at that time, that was the biggest thing, was he was being criticized that he made poor decisions at certain times in the game. He says, you know what? Let them keep talking, because you know what? That fuels me to show them otherwise. And I think that is the mentality that he has carried with him all throughout his career at Purdue. And the fact that uh, what's the media going to do when Michigan walks in? Oh, the last time we had a top 10 matchup in Mackey, this happened. That's going to happen. And if they say it before, you know, that preview comes up, and he's going to know they're going to bring it up, and it's just going to fuel him to want to do better, and show them. Now, is it a chance? Is there a chance that he has a stinker against one of those two? Sure. I mean, they're really, really good teams. They're going to prep for him. They might actually do something to where, like Iowa State, where they frustrate him just as much as the Cyclones did, and they do get a win. But it ain't going to be for lack of trying. Like Braden Smith is going to put it on his shoulders and just say, you know what? It's not going to happen. Let them talk. I'm going to show them different. And I think that will fuel. And, we talked about it the other, excuse me, on Tuesday. Sorry about that. On Tuesday, TKR really he was upset they didn't beat Auburn by more. They won by 28 points, and he was ticked they didn't win by more. These guys really do take stuff personally, and knowing that now, it prepares me to say, okay, if they listen and they hear, well, the last time there was a top 10 matchup, this happened, they're going to say, no, it's not happening this time. It just, the team mentality seems to be that way.
Yeah, when you've got three, seniors that have done what they've done and have both individually and collectively on the teams they've been a part of, like when you hear that kind of stuff, it makes you feel disrespected, and it's going to put a fire in you. And I think that's one of the greatest advantages Purdue has over anybody else in the country, not just the level of experience, but the level of, just an ability to respond and the way that they carry themselves, the confidence that they exude. Like, these guys don't think there's anybody in the country that should be beating them because they have the most experience and they've done so many things, and they're also really talented basketball players. And so that's one of those things that I think even come March and come, pivotal moments in the season when championships are on the line is the thing that puts Purdue over the edge over teams like even Michigan and Michigan State, who have good talent, good transfer additions, and good cores, but ultimately, like, they might not have that same level of I don't even just want to say fight, because I think they're going to fight, but like this team, the collectiveness and the camaraderie there for Purdue is just going to be something that's going to be a huge advantage down the road.
Well, I think the coaching staff really embraces their camaraderie, because I see a lot of smiles and laughing amongst the players to the coaches as well. So it's not, but yet the coaches or the players know they're the coaches. You know what I mean? They respect the position they're in, but yet there is a level of respect from the coaches to the players to know that, you know what, you guys have this. You might get a stern talking to or yelling at once in a while, but you know that it's out of a place of love and knowing that they can do better. You know what I mean? And I think that's a great combination for, just like you said, they want to win, and stuff like that. So it's definitely exciting to see this team keeping up with what they've done all year with one bump in the road. And I will just simply call it was a bump. It wasn't a catastrophe.
Right. Yeah. Kind of back to the 3 games that have happened since then. Like, that shows kind of the anomaly that Iowa State was, and it shows
Correct.
that
Yeah.
it doesn't define the team. I think there were a lot of questions right after that game. It was like, is Purdue okay? Is this cause for concern, or is this just a one-off game? And Purdue's done about everything they can to show that it's a one-off game. And you've mentioned it before, even like, this might end up being one of those moments that down the road made the biggest difference for Purdue in a good way. Like, they needed to get that game to make the difference and to basically just, pick up the pace a little bit and make some of those adjustments and grow in those ways that wouldn't have happened even with a close game. Like, a close 5-point loss at Mackey to Iowa State doesn't have people reeling. it has them thinking, oh, Purdue's
Right.
maybe not the best team in the country, but like Iowa State played really well and Purdue hung with them and battled. And maybe they drop a couple spots. People still think they're a championship contender. That Iowa State, the way they lost that game, raised a lot of questions. And so, yeah, we're starting to see just the positive benefits that can come from those types of moments.
Yeah, it's never easy to swallow when you're taking it. You know, when you're taking
Right.
the whooping, it's never easy or fun, or you're not happy about it. But then you sit there and sit back after everything's played out, and you just look at it and go, "Oh, that actually wasn't a bad. We didn't like it, but it actually wasn't the most worst thing that we could have had happen to us." So, definitely agree with you on that. The old cliche, well, it's better to lose. No, you know what? You still don't want to lose. No, no. But there are lessons you can learn from a loss, and I think Purdue's done that, and maybe they're teaching people that, hey, we learned our lesson. You probably should get on board with us being one of the better teams in the country, because you're going to see a lot of us in March and probably April. But
Yeah.
but all right, well, that brings us to the end of the Friday edition of Boilermaker Lounge. Grant, have fun in West Lafayette on Monday. Make sure the Boilermakers don't stumble. And of course, we know that if they do, you will be banned from all other games this year. No, I'm joking. But thanks so much, everybody, for joining us on this edition of Boilermaker Lounge. For the All-American Grant Flora, I'm Sam Springer. We'll see you on Tuesday.